As you know, the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says President Biden's infrastructure plan would need to be, in his words, completely recrafted to win any Republican votes at all. And Democrat Joe Manchin, as you just heard, he also says the bill needs to be changed. How much is President Biden, Mr. Secretary, willing to compromise?
Well, you know, President Biden cares about a bipartisan approach, and he cares about what members of the Senate and the House and the public think. So I think you'll see a lot of listening. But at the end of the day, there's a clear vision from the president. It's a good vision. It's supported by the American people. It will contribute to the creation of millions of jobs, and we feel great about it. But yes, of course, you know, this is the beginning of a legislative process that'll have a lot of back and forth, and I'm sure more ideas will come into the mix, and that's a good thing.
So he is willing to compromise. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, he'll decide what the right balance is. But I'll tell you, the vision that he already put forward, in my view, it's pretty hard to improve upon. It's paid for. It creates and contributes to the creation of millions of jobs. It'll have something like $600 billion for transportation infrastructure, allow us to deal with 10,000 bridges around the country, get broadband out to every American. So many things in there that we have needed to do for a long time. So the vision as it stands is great. I'm sure there's always room to benefit from hearing different opinions.
And he'll be hearing a lot of different opinions, not just from the Republicans, but some of his fellow Democrats, as you know, as well. You say infrastructure goes beyond roads and bridges, but this bill also funds things like elderly care, home health care. Senator Bernie Sanders says child care should be considered as well. How is that infrastructure? Are Democrats simply tacking on other priorities, and these are all critically important priorities, to this massive bill and simply calling it infrastructure?
Well, I would say that infrastructure is the foundation that makes it possible for Americans to thrive and live lives of their choosing. And I know there's a lot of quibbling over the definition of infrastructure. I've been puzzled to hear a lot of Republicans express a view that things like water and wastewater pipes don't count as infrastructure. I think they do. They're very important for us to be able to live and thrive and have a strong economy. Same thing with broadband. Now, I know broadband is not traditional infrastructure, but you know, railroads weren't traditional infrastructure until we built them. Part of good infrastructure policy is thinking about the future. And at the end of the day, I don't want us to get lost in the semantics, because the important thing is these are good policies that the American people want and need and support. So people can call them whatever they like. At the end of the day, this is a jobs plan, and that's the president's focus.
It's one thing to call it a jobs plan. It's another thing to call it an infrastructure plan. But child care, elderly care, which obviously are so critically important in our country, do you consider child care, elderly care to be infrastructure?
Does anyone think that our child care infrastructure in this country is good enough? We don't. We think we've got to make a lot of investments in child care infrastructure to make it possible for families, parents, workers to be able to thrive. All of these things are connected. I know there's a tendency in Washington to slice them into one piece at a time, but you know, that's a philosophical or academic exercise. At the end of the day, this plan is about a stronger economy that helps Americans live better. And I think that's one of the reasons why it commands such remarkable support among the American people. And interestingly, the research is showing American people support it even more when they hear about how we're planning to pay for it, which is asking corporations to pay their fair share.
As you know, the outgoing Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri says a smaller bill focused on what is traditional infrastructure would be, in his words, and I'm quoting him now, an easy win for President Biden. Why not start with a more narrow plan right now and get widespread bipartisan support?
Well, I think we're here to do what's right, not necessarily what's easy. Although, again, we're not asking for a tough vote here on a plan that most Americans already support. And I just can't agree with the idea that, you know, cutting off something like broadband would somehow make this bill better. I think including something like broadband does make this bill better. And when you add it all up, it's better than the sum of its parts.
On Sunday, you claimed one analysis found this plan would lead, in your words, to 19 million jobs. That's not true, as our fact checker Daniel Dale just wrote about. The analysis is talking about the overall economy and finds this Biden plan will contribute a net 2.7 million jobs. Can you set the record straight for us?
Yeah, I should be precise about this. So Moody's modeled a future, a scenario where the American Jobs Plan is passed. And in that scenario, they see the American economy creating 19 million jobs. And that's 2.7 more than if this bill doesn't pass. So the point is, this will contribute to a scenario where we create that many jobs, and millions of them are specifically attributable just to this plan. And this is really important because there are still people out there arguing with a straight face that this would somehow lead to there being fewer jobs. Instead, it's clearly the case that we'll create more jobs as a country to the tune of millions if we pass this. And I would add one more thing that we saw in a different study that came from Georgetown. Very interesting study pointing out that the majority of jobs that you create with a good infrastructure plan go to people who don't need to have college degrees. It's so important where I come from and a lot of places around the country where we're worried about the future of manufacturing, we're worried about the future of blue-collar jobs, that this is creating jobs both for people with and people without college degrees. That's how we build a strong economy for the future.
Yeah, 2.7 million jobs, nothing to sneeze at all, but it's not 19 million jobs. 2.7 million jobs, very important. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining us.